Kansas with a net ranking of 7, but look at the quad 1 wins. That's what Kansas has over everybody else in the country. The most quad 1 wins, 12 of them. You look at the other teams on the 1 line, including Purdue, which right now the Boilermakers are the number 1 overall seed, according to Jerry. Purdue with 9 quad 1 wins. Kansas is going to have a great shot at a number 1 seed because of all those great victories. And Jerry Palm has a brand new bracketology for us on this Thursday. We welcome him and Gary Parrish into HQ. Let's start with Alabama. Jerry, still a 1 seed. They lost their first SEC game of the season last night at Tennessee. They've done a lot this season. Are they still sitting pretty for getting a 1 seed if they don't fall apart here down the stretch?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Alabama's been the best team in that league all season. There's no real shame in losing to Tennessee. That's obviously a very good team and playing on their home court. Well, not a great night for Alabama, but it's been a great season. They've got a ton of quad 1 wins. They've got the best win that anybody on this line, I believe, has, which is the win at Houston. So, Alabama's done a good job. They're really the only negative, and it's only a negative when you're comparing 1 seed type teams, is the loss to Oklahoma, because that's a team that's not in the bracket. But Alabama's having a great season.
Yeah, Alabama, and I'm with Jerry on this, still 7-4 in quadrant 1, 0 losses outside of the first quadrant, still only 1 loss in the league, and they are beating SEC opponents, Tennessee notwithstanding, by an average of 21.1 points per game. That's even more than 2015 Kentucky with Karl Anthony Towns and Devin Booker. That team that went 18-0 in the SEC, that's even more than they were able to beat SEC opponents by on average. So this is still one of the best teams in the country. The truth is, they just played last night in a place where literally nobody would be expected to win. That is why Alabama, even as the number 1 team in the AP poll, was an underdog in Knoxville. And then they went out, turned it over 19 times, let Tennessee get 15 more shots. Alabama was terrible inside the 2, inside the arc from 2-point range, like 33.3% from the field inside that arc. So it was just a bad performance from Alabama, but still an awesome season by the Crimson Tide. If it started today, the NCAA tournament, I'm with Jerry. They would be a number 1 seed, and I think on Selection Sunday, they'll be right there.
The team that beat them, Tennessee, up to the 3 line now. That's a big win, Jerry, though they've had some head-scratching losses. How high can they climb, and how interesting is their resume?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. They've got a couple of nice wins. And really not a lot of good wins, but, that's obviously their best of the season so far. And then, but the losses, they've got 3 losses to teams that aren't going to go to the tournament, probably aren't going to see the tournament at all. They've got 4 quad 2 losses, although those are not all, teams that are going to miss the tournament. It's a very weird resume, especially for a team that can compete at the top of the bracket. And, Tennessee just, the thing about, Kansas and Purdue and Houston and Alabama, they're consistent. And once you get off that top line, you start seeing inconsistencies in most of these teams' resumes. And Tennessee is one of those teams where the inconsistency just kind of shows a little.
Yeah, I have Tennessee lower in my top 25 and 1 than where the Vols are at in the AP poll. I, based on Twitter mention, definitely have Tennessee lower than where Tennessee fans want them to be. But Jerry makes a good point, a point that I've made over and over again. The loss column has to matter, and Tennessee has 4 losses outside of quadrant 1. Just for some context, there's only 3 teams in my entire top 25 and 1 that have at least 4 losses outside of quadrant 1. It's St. Mary's, Pitt, and Tennessee. So I know that the Vols have these big wins over Kansas and Texas and Alabama. And on the right night, the Vols are absolutely capable of beating anybody because defensively they are terrific. But that offense is a little shaky, which has caused them to really mess up their loss column a little bit. And if I'm a Vols fan, I'd be afraid that is going to impact them significantly on Selection Sunday.
And as you guys always point out, the committee is not looking at your net rating. Your net rating could be 1. That doesn't matter. What matters is your opponents, the teams you've beaten and the teams you've lost to. They've got Kentucky in Lexington Saturday on CBS. Meantime, Purdue, Jerry's Purdue Boilermakers, still the top overall seed despite back-to-back road losses. A big one tonight, Jerry. They're just a 1-point favorite at a red-hot Maryland team.
I'm a little surprised they're favored, actually. I don't think this is a great matchup for Purdue, because lately they've had trouble taking care of the basketball. 16 turnovers at least in each of the last 3 games. They lost 2 of them because they had double-digit turnovers in one half of each of those games. And Maryland can really press. So they gave Purdue trouble in the second half at Mackey with that. So if Purdue doesn't take care of the ball better than they have lately, this could really be a problem for them. But for now, they're still the overall number 1. Actually was going to move Alabama ahead of them if they had won at Tennessee. That's how close these 3 teams are together at the moment. But Purdue has got the best collection of both wins and the minimum of losses, and losses so far to teams that are still in the bracket, although Rutgers is in the process of tanking.
I'm with Jerry. I would have Purdue as the number 1 overall seed right now, evidence being that I have the Boilermakers back at number 1 in the top 25-1. Like Jerry said, they have 9 quadrant 1 wins. The only school in the country with more is Kansas, and Kansas has 2 more losses than Purdue has. The only teams that can match Purdue in that quadrant 1 win category, Baylor and Texas. They both have 2 more losses than Purdue has. So right now, in this moment, Purdue, quite clearly, in my opinion, has the nation's best body of work. That could change with a loss at Maryland, but right now, Purdue should be projected as the number 1 overall seed for the 2023 NCAA tournament.
We've been looking all season for the second best team in the Big Ten behind Purdue. Gary, I'm going to come back to you on Northwestern, up to Jerry's 5 line. This is a team that's only been to the tournament once in its history. It was under Chris Collins. They've stuck with him through some pretty thin seasons. How surprising has their resurgence been this season, fighting through COVID and a bunch of injuries to be all alone in second place?
Well,
very surprising. Go ahead, Jerry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Their season has been remarkable. They got off to a really tough start. Pitt beat them by 30-something on their home floor, but that changed their season because it got everybody's attention. And they decided that they were going to change the way they were playing. They were going to be physical. They were going to be tough. And it's worked for them to the point now where they've got a home win over Purdue and a sweep of Indiana, and they beat Illinois at home, and they won at Michigan State. I mean, this is a pretty good resume. Really, they could be even higher if not for 4 home losses to Rutgers and Michigan and Ohio State and Pitt. And 2 of those teams at least are not going to make the tournament. So, and that's why, the net doesn't like Northwestern, but they have a better resume than their margin of victory-based metrics will indicate.
Yeah, Chris, it's really surprising that Northwestern finds itself in this place because they weren't good last season. They lost multiple transfers. They didn't, on paper, look like they would be good this season, and that's among the reasons Chris Collins entered this season on the so-called hot seat. And when you are on the hot seat and your team is not expected to be good, way more often than not, history tells us it's about to be your last year coaching at that institution. And yet here's Chris on the verge of taking Northwestern to the NCAA tournament for the second time in school history. He's the only man ever responsible for that. That equals, I think, probably contract extension. It's one of the great stories in college basketball. And me and my colleague, John Rothstein at CBS Sports, last night on Inside College Basketball actually debated who should be the Big Ten Coach of the Year. And while I believe it should be Matt Painter at Purdue, John does make a compelling case that maybe, just maybe, it'll be Chris Collins at Northwestern.
Huge victory over Indiana last night. They'll host Iowa on Sunday to another team wearing purple and a team going the other direction. TCU, Jerry, a 6 seed. They lost for the 4th straight time last night at Iowa State. All of those games, though, without their best player, Mike Miles Jr., who they expect to get back at some point very soon. They thought he might return last night, but he didn't. Preseason Player of the Year in the Big 12. How is the committee going to factor all that in?
Well, I mean, the games are the games and the results are the results. The committee can't pretend that they would have won games had he played, and they can't pretend the games didn't happen. So when it comes to injuries like this, and obviously this is a key player, and he had a problem earlier in the season where they lost to Northwestern State in a game that he missed. I don't think you can blame that just on him being out, but still, the committee can only do so much. For one thing, everybody's got problems, but for another, it's just you are what your resume says you are, and the consideration you get is that you might get a seed line bump. You probably won't even notice if the committee has actually given TCU any consideration for the games that they have played without Miles.
the Mike Miles injury is as big of an injury as anybody's had to deal with this season. Like you said, Chris, he was the Big 12 preseason player of the year. He went down early in a game against Mississippi State, and since the moment he went down, TCU, as you know, is 1-5. The lone victory in that stretch, a 4-point win at home over West Virginia. So they need him back in the worst way. And like Jerry said, that Northwestern State game early in the season, that's a big blemish on the resume. It's worth noting that Mike Miles missed that game. Also, Damian Baum missed that game. So 2 of TCU's top 3 players weren't in that. I do assume that if even one of them were, they don't have that quadrant 4 loss on their body of work. But the selection committee can't just erase losses from your body of work. You are, as Jerry accurately put it, what your resume says you are. And that's why Jamie Dixon, boy, they need Mike Miles Jr. back ASAP.
Gary Parrish and Jerry Palm with us on HQ. You can check out Jerry's brand new bracketology for this Thursday at cbssports.com. The first team out of his field is North Carolina at 16-10 overall, a net ranking of 40. Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander talk about the Tar Heels on the very latest Eye on College Basketball podcast. It's a big weekend in college basketball because on Saturday we get our first bracket reveal. The committee is going to release its top 16 teams, and they're going to do it on CBS and Paramount Plus, 12:30 Eastern Time, ahead of Kentucky and Tennessee.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.